Picture this. You've worked your whole life, earned enough to finally treat yourself, and you walk into a place expecting respect. Instead, before you even get a word out, you're sized up, dismissed, and treated like you don't belong. That's exactly what happened to one man when he stepped into a car dealership on a busy Saturday afternoon. He walked in with confidence, calm, and a quiet smile, but what happened next would shake the entire showroom. The dealership was buzzing that day, music playing softly in the background, salespeople darting from one client to another, trying to make deals. Polished cars gleamed under bright lights, every surface sparkling as if each vehicle had been waiting its whole life for the right buyer. But as much as it was about the cars, it was also about appearances. Everyone inside was watching, everyone trying to impress. And that was the exact stage where arrogance was about to meet its downfall. A tall black man in his mid-40s walked through the doors. His name was Mr. Daniels. He was neatly dressed in a tailored suit, not flashy, but classy, someone who clearly respected himself and the place he was walking into. He wasn't loud, wasn't pushy, he simply strolled around, eyes taking in the luxury SUVs and sleek sports cars lined up on the floor. There was a calm authority about him, the kind that doesn't need to shout to be noticed, but the very first person who noticed him did not see that authority. He saw only skin color and made up a story in his head. Rick, a mid-30s salesman with slick back hair and an ego bigger than his paycheck, locked eyes with Mr. Daniels. Instead of walking over with a handshake and a smile like he did with other customers, Rick narrowed his eyes, folded his arms, and leaned against a car as if already dismissing him. When Mr. Daniels politely asked for assistance, Rick didn't even bother with pleasantries. He smirked and said, "These cars aren't cheap, sir. Maybe you'd be more comfortable at the used lot down the street." His tone wasn't just cold, it was dripping with condescension, loud enough that a few nearby customers turned their heads in disbelief. You could feel the sting in the air. Mr. Daniels stayed composed. He gave a small smile and asked calmly, "Actually, I'm interested in learning more about that SUV over there. Could you show me?" But Rick wasn't done. He laughed under his breath, shook his head, and replied, "That model costs more than your yearly salary, my friend. No offense, but why waste both our time?" And with that, he grabbed a clipboard and pretended to check paperwork, turning his back as though the conversation was already over. The humiliation was sharp, clear, and intentional. Other salespeople glanced over awkwardly, whispering among themselves. One even gave Rick a nudge, signaling that he should at least be polite. But Rick waved them off, muttering, "He's not buying anything." "You'll see." The audience inside the dealership could feel it. Customers waiting in line for paperwork shuffled uncomfortably. One woman whispered to her husband, "That was out of line." Yet, no one stepped in. They simply watched, and here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Mr. Daniels didn't snap, didn't raise his voice, didn't demand respect. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and quietly made a call. His tone was low, almost casual. Rick, standing a few feet away, smirked again, whispering to another colleague, "He's probably calling someone to give him a ride." Minutes passed, and still, Mr. Daniels stayed calm, strolling slowly along the line of luxury cars, his eyes steady and thoughtful. Meanwhile, the dealership manager, Mr. Cole, noticed the tension. A man in his 50s, neatly dressed, with a sharp business-like demeanor, he prided himself on keeping the dealership's image pristine. But instead of correcting his salesman, he decided the best way to handle the situation was to quietly escort the customer out before it became messy. He approached with a rehearsed smile, the kind of smile that hides more than it shows. "Sir," he said smoothly, "I understand you're interested in our vehicles, but perhaps this dealership isn't the right fit for you. There's another branch downtown that might be more suitable." His words were sugar-coated, but the message was clear: you don't belong here. Imagine the weight of that moment. Not one, but two employees of this dealership were telling him, based on nothing but prejudice, that he wasn't worthy of being there. And still, Mr. Daniels didn't flinch. He gave a polite nod, a faint smile, and said softly, "Thank you for your time." As he turned to leave, Rick couldn't help himself. With a smirk plastered across his face, he muttered just loud enough to be heard, "That's what I thought." The arrogance in his voice was thick, his chest puffed out as though he had just won some invisible battle. Mr. Daniels walked out into the sunlight, his step steady, his face unreadable. To everyone watching, it seemed like the end of the story. A man insulted, disrespected, and forced to leave quietly. Rick returned to leaning against the hood of a car, smirking, basking in his own self-importance. The manager returned to his office, certain he had protected his dealership's image. Customers whispered, shaking their heads, some disgusted, others too afraid to say anything, but here's where arrogance met its greatest enemy, truth. Barely 10 minutes later, the quiet hum of the dealership was shattered by the low rumble of engines outside. Heads turned toward the wide glass windows at the front of the showroom. A convoy of sleek black SUVs rolled into the lot, each one polished to perfection. The doors opened almost in unison, and out stepped men in dark suits, earpieces tucked neatly in their ears. They weren't there to buy cars. They were security. Every customer in the dealership froze. Salespeople stood rooted to the floor, glancing nervously at each other. Rick straightened his tie, suddenly unsure. Even the manager poked his head out of his office, confusion etched across his face, and then, as if the air itself had shifted, the same man they had mocked only minutes before stepped back through the dealership doors. But this time, he wasn't alone. Flanked on both sides by his security detail, his presence filled the entire room. He didn't have to say a word. The silence was deafening. The same man Rick had dismissed as unworthy now commanded the attention of every single person inside. Rick's smirk vanished. The clipboard slipped slightly from his grip. His eyes darted around the room, searching for someone, anyone, to explain what was happening. The manager's face drained of color as he realized he had just dismissed someone far beyond his imagination, and in that charged silence, with every eye fixed on him, the question on everyone's mind was the same: who exactly was the man they had just insulted? The room was frozen. Every eye followed the man who had just returned with a presence so commanding, it felt like the air had shifted. He hadn't shouted, he hadn't demanded attention, yet the entire dealership bent under the weight of his silence. Even the sound of the air conditioning seemed too loud now. Rick, who had laughed just minutes before, stood with his clipboard pressed awkwardly to his chest, his face pale, his throat dry. The arrogance that had carried him earlier had evaporated, leaving only fear. Mr. Daniels walked slowly between the cars, each step echoing on the polished floor like a countdown. His security team flanked him, stone-faced and alert. Everyone in the room knew now, this was no ordinary customer. The manager, Mr. Cole, hurried forward, his smile plastered on but trembling around the edges. "Sir, welcome back," he stammered, his words rushed and shallow. I wasn't aware earlier, please allow me to apologize on behalf of my staff." But Daniels didn't stop to acknowledge him. He ran his hand along the edge of a black SUV, his eyes calm, his posture unshaken. Then, in a voice steady and clear, he spoke to everyone, not just the manager. "When I walked into this place earlier, I walked in as a man. A customer. Someone ready to do business. I was met with disrespect, arrogance, and prejudice. I was told I did not belong here." His words landed heavily, drawing uncomfortable shifts from customers still watching, phones in hand. Rick tried to interject, forcing a chuckle that came out dry and nervous. "Sir, I think you might have misunderstood, it was just a..." Daniels turned to him, his gaze sharp but controlled. "Do not insult me further by pretending ignorance. You knew exactly what you were doing. You looked at me and decided you were above me. You thought I wasn't worth your time. And you thought your words would never come back to haunt you." Rick's mouth snapped shut. The heat of shame spread across his face, visible even to the customers standing a few cars away. His confidence had turned to dust. Daniels gestured to his assistant, who stepped forward carrying a folder thick with documents. He took it, opened it slowly, and addressed the room again. "What you didn't know," he said, "is that I didn't come here to buy one car. I came here to purchase a fleet of vehicles for my company. Your arrogance has cost you not one sale, but a partnership worth millions." Gasps erupted around the room. A couple who had been waiting for financing stopped mid-sentence, staring wide-eyed. Another customer whispered to her husband, "Did he say millions?" Phones recorded every word, capturing the collapse of arrogance in real time. The manager's face drained of color. His hands shook as he tried to smooth over the situation. "Sir, please, let me personally handle this. I assure you, you'll receive the highest level of service, the best prices, whatever you need. Just allow us the chance to make this right." Daniels shook his head slowly. His calmness was more cutting than anger. Respect should not depend on the size of a transaction. Respect is the minimum you give to another human being. And yet, when I entered, I was treated as though my presence was an inconvenience. You don't get a second chance to show someone their worth. Rick stepped forward slightly, desperation dripping from every word. "Please, sir, I didn't mean it like that. I was just joking around." "I didn't realize," Daniels cut him off with a look so sharp that Rick froze mid-sentence. "You didn't realize who I was," he corrected. "And that is the problem. You thought I was no one. You thought I didn't matter. And now, you want to beg because you see what you've lost." A murmur of agreement rippled through the customers. Phones tilted closer, capturing every painful second of Rick's downfall. The silence afterward was unbearable, heavy with judgment. Daniels turned toward the entrance, his voice ringing with finality. "I do not do business with people who cannot recognize humanity before wealth. There are many places where respect is the foundation of service. I will gladly take my business to one of them." His assistant closed the folder with a decisive snap. Security fell in around him, their presence reminding everyone just how significant this man truly was. He began walking toward the exit, every eye following him as though pulled by gravity itself. Rick stumbled forward, his composure gone. "Please. Don't do this, sir. Don't ruin my career over one mistake. I didn't mean it, I swear." His voice cracked, desperation echoing in the silent showroom. But Daniels never looked back. He didn't need to. His silence was answer enough. The glass doors slid open, sunlight streaming into the dealership as Daniels stepped outside. His convoy of SUVs waited, doors opened in perfect unison. Within seconds, he was gone, the engines roaring as the vehicles rolled away, leaving behind nothing but silence, shame, and the ruins of arrogance. The fallout came fast. Within hours, the videos hit social media, spreading like wildfire. Clips of Rick dismissing Daniels, followed by Daniels' return with security, racked up millions of views. Hashtags trended. Outrage poured in from every corner of the internet. Racist salesman exposed. Luxury dealership loses millions after discrimination. Reviews for the dealership tanked overnight. People flooded their pages with one-star ratings and angry comments. Longtime customers canceled their orders. Corporate headquarters stepped in, furious at the damage to their brand. Investigations were launched. Rick was fired almost immediately, escorted out of the dealership with none of the swagger he once carried. The manager, Mr. Cole, faced heavy scrutiny, his career teetering on collapse. His name became associated with failure, arrogance, and scandal. The dealership itself became infamous, a symbol of how arrogance can destroy everything. Meanwhile, Daniels kept his word. At another dealership across town, he was welcomed with genuine warmth and respect. He shook hands, smiled, and was treated as the valued customer he had always been. And there, he signed contracts worth millions, purchasing an entire fleet of luxury vehicles for his company. The employees there celebrated, not just for the sale, but for the proof that kindness and professionalism always pay off in the end. Back at the disgraced dealership, empty showrooms replaced the bustling weekends they once knew. The cars sat untouched, their polished surfaces reflecting nothing but silence. The staff who remained avoided talking about what had happened, their pride shattered, their reputation destroyed. They had learned the hardest way possible that respect costs nothing, but a lack of it can take everything away. Daniels never gloated, never bragged, never sought revenge beyond his simple act of walking away. His strength was in his dignity, his refusal to let anger dictate his actions. He proved to everyone watching that true power lies in composure, in patience, and in knowing that self-respect is worth more than any material purchase, and the story lived on. It became more than just a scandal. It became a lesson, a warning, a reminder. A reminder that the way you treat people matters more than anything you sell, more than any deal you make. Because one moment of arrogance can undo a lifetime of work. One moment of prejudice can cost you everything you thought you had. Respect costs nothing. A greeting, a smile, a moment of patience, it's free. But disrespect? Disrespect can take away your job, your reputation, your livelihood, and leave you with nothing but regret. Rick learned it too late. The manager learned it too late. But everyone who watched, everyone who heard the story, carried the lesson with them, and that's why this story matters. Because it shows us all that dignity cannot be bought, respect should never be withheld, and arrogance always, always comes with a price.